The digital passport that they tried to get people on during the COVID era, they're going to swing it into a digital rationing card. So that's a huge uptake in terms of people who will be using it. People are going to do it for food. And what's going to be the fastest uptake? Okay, they're going to bankrupt the world and they're going to starve the world. But hey, we can give you an out. All you have to do is get this facial recognition tech, sign up for the app, whatever form that takes. You'll be put right into the social credit score, and you will have access to digital currency and your digital rationing card. Are sanctions and a weaponized U.S. dollar prompting central banks to diversify with gold? As the U.S. imposed the harshest sanctions in history against Putin, the central banks of Saudi Arabia and China have taken notice. Saudi Arabia is considering accepting Chinese yuan for oil sales to China. Could this spell the end of the U.S. dollar as a global reserve currency? Because since March 2020, gold's up 30%, silver's doubled. Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo all forecast gold to surpass $2,000 an ounce. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group has the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the no fee for life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Call 1-800-356-4470 for a free investor guide today. And with the knowledge that Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer from 2016 to present, click on the link in the description box below for more information. And now on with the video.
Having said that, we are ready to go. Thanks so much, David, for joining us. Do you want to give us sort of a wrap-up in regards to what you've been dealing with, if anything at all? I mean, I've seen in general, like sort of the Tennessee, I don't even know what you call that area down there. Is that considered like the New Madrid area? I mean, it just looked like it's been really bad the last few weeks, and been wondering how you've been holding up down there.
Oh, it's just windy. I've had more pine trees fall in the back it's just such a continuous cleanup of damage from winds, and it still can, forecast to go out for the next 10, 12 days of just gusty Beaufort 4 or 5 winds, and cutting some tree areas down and cutting into the brush to be able to expand to get a larger garden, and, doing some work around the property. Most times we would burn that brush, but we haven't been able to light fires except last night for a few hours, and it was real tiny. We just wanted to clear something. But just in terms of being able to actually clear property, we're getting real difficult because the winds are so high all the time. And, bee boxes blowing over, and it's just, something is happening with the atmosphere. And I've, on my Patreon channel, Adapt 2030, I do a couple more different update videos than I do up over on the Adapt 2030 YouTube channel or the Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. But having talked about the winds so heavily, I am getting a tidal wave of responses saying that wherever they are on the planet, and this is Southern Hemisphere and Northern Hemisphere, because I have a global audience like you do, that the winds are strange everywhere and far more intense than had been felt or noticed before globally. So this goes right along with, if you're doing trajectory of when Pluto's atmosphere compressed, or Uranus's atmosphere reversed, and then Neptune had the X-ray flares that came off across the rings, and the 10x increase in Jupiter auroras with Mars, and the minerals in the crust starting to glow with auroras above the planet. Those were on 6-month increments, and we were the next planet in turn. So I was looking for atmospheric disturbances and anomalies in May. And here's the thing from the news you're talking about. The fertilizer shortages were going to dovetail into that in May, where most people would understand that the amount of food to be grown reflects how much fertilizer and herbicide. Not that I'm a fan, but that's just how it's done. So be a realist that, if I'm talking about herbicides and glyphosate and GMO seeds, that's the way agriculture is done today. So get over it. And that's the way it is. And without those inputs, people starve. And the dovetailing of the atmospheric compression events And the fertilizer shortages 2 months from now would be full awareness of the globe, of everybody on the planet understanding what's happening, is a mere 2 months away. So look at the distraction that was thrown in front of us. You got the war, and that explains all the grain embargoes and all the grain shortages. And now I just saw Kazakhstan's going to stop exporting grains too. So that really, once I read that article, I just sat there and dropped my head for a minute and go, this is really it. This is truly it. Truly. We're going to, not maybe myself because I'm growing my own food, but there's going to be a global famine this year.
Yeah, no, I mean, the first thing I thought about was several headlines. One headline that came out, again, Christian over at Ice Age Farmer 2 has been pumping out some good info too. But Germany, literally in one day, specifically Aldi's, at least a 30% price increase. I think it's on 400 SKUs of items, up to 50%. So imagine walking in one day, you're normally paying $4 or something, and it could be anywhere between 6 and 8 in one day. So we talked about it last year, towards the end of last year, and you were probably talking about it longer than that, about a 4x multiplier. I got to think we're at least at a 2x multiplier, and we're not even at the halfway point on a lot of, when I go in and I buy this certain stuff that I have bought like 2 years or so ago, it's darn near 50% increase already. So I don't know, man. Like maybe we're underselling it. Maybe it'll be worse than a 4x multiplier. I know this is going to be really bad. This is going to be far worse than the Great Depression. They got to get everyone so desperate to get on board with the digital economy. Which, oh, by the way, I'm sure you saw the videos of that World Global Summit and all those satanic leaders talking about how we are going to move over to the digital currency. So I mean, we know we're going to that, right?
Yeah, and the digital passport that they tried to get people on during the COVID era, they're going to swing it into a digital rationing card. So that's a huge uptake in terms of people who will be using it. People are going to do it for food. And, what's going to be the fastest uptake? Okay, they're going to bankrupt the world and they're going to starve the world. But hey, we can give you an out. All you have to do is get this facial recognition tech, sign up for the app, whatever form that takes. You'll be put right into the social credit score, and you will have access to digital currency and your digital rationing card. Because I don't think they're going to, because I'm already seeing reports of Sam's Club and Costco going into purchase limits and full non-availability already today. So how do you get people on a digital ration card? You can't just tell them, okay, well, Sam's Club is finally going to say only one per customer. Well, that's only going to fly for so long. And they're going to need to get you on the system. And once you're on the system and you're using their money and their food, access to food, and they're going to scrape all of your social media and anything associated with you for voice recordings, video postings, or anything through the past history of you being on the internet, and that will be your base layer entry social credit score, all based on what you've done through the internet through your entire lifespan.
How do we go from where we're at right now with being able to go to the bank, and let's just say I've got 5,000 in the bank, average person or whatever, a couple thousand in the bank. How do you go from moving to that rationing ID card? Are they going to say, okay, your 2,000 will convert into something? They're just going to say, oh, you ain't got any money anymore, you're starting fresh. How do you see that transition?
I think it might be a liquidity crisis across the planet that would, just like we saw, was that 1998 and 2008. But I think this time, I was watching a couple of videos from Jim Rickards, and he's one of my favorites. I really believe he understands and far more than most on what's going to happen. But the way he was describing it, and I'm just, repeating what he said, that it's going to move into the ultimate liquidity crisis where the Federal Reserve has no power to even stop it. And at that point, everything will collapse on the fire sale, and banks will start their bail-ins along with credit unions and IRAs, and everything will be bailed in. And then at that point, it will be reset, and you'll have no say to what the reset is. So your $5,000 in the bank could turn out to be $5 new, or whatever they're going to tell. I'm pretty sure they're going to still term it as $1 because we're used to that, and they don't want to spook everybody and change it to the send or something. I don't know, but they're going to keep the name the same. But when it comes into this global liquidity crisis, all the actors of the central banks are going to work in conjunction and say we can't control it, and then it'll just cascade downward. But that reset is the scary thing, because then to have you have your money in the bank one day, and then they lock it and they bail it in, then they reset the value to X for whatever new dollars. But then to have access to those new dollars, then you're also going to need to do the facial recognition and get on the new system to even have access to your own money, in addition to the central bank digital currencies. So I really believe that the food, the CBDC money, and then your own personal money, that whatever was left over after the wipeout is, then you're going to have to get on this system to be able to access any of it.
And that's why we've been saying, hey, don't keep a whole lot of money in your bank account. I know I'm cutting it thin every month on purpose, because I don't. And that's going to be my next question. Like, when do you suspect the rug is completely pulled out beneath our feet? I realize it's sort of happening in stages and they're sort of tugging, but when is it completely? We get to that point where, hey, you wake up and you can't get nothing out of the ATMs. You can't do anything. And then that's when it's all pandemonium's going to break loose on top of already, prices through the roof and not being able to purchase something. I mean, if you don't have the ability to go in a store and purchase in the first place, then you're completely at will to whoever maintains the system. But when do you suspect? Later this year? Is it next year? Because you have a lot of countries talking about digital currency 2023. But do you think it could be later this year that they start to do this?
Well, let me walk you through my timeline with the food shortages, and then I think we can, and then I want to get your opinion on the food shortage timeline here.
Sure, let's do it.
You and I talked, we've been on the show for a bit here, and even last year I was saying that the fertilizer shortage is going to be the wild card that's going to change the world. And there was going to be an awareness of coming into planting season. And you got to realize, this is 6 months ago we were talking about this, 5 months ago, that the awareness of the fertilizer shortages was going to make like CNBC and CNN headlines as the farmers were really getting into the plant. And then they realized that there weren't enough farm inputs. Now, that was before all the Russia thing going on. So we were looking at, like 18% global decline in agriculture just because of the fertilizer and herbicide shortages. So, my whole timeline was in May. At the end of May, when everything is pretty much planted across the U.S. and Canada and all the Northern Hemisphere, for example, that the awareness would come out that we didn't plant as much. And then with the fertilizer shortages, we could do simple math and see what the declines would be on the acreage basis or the bushel basis on an acre for the output, because they didn't have whatever input, whether it be the fertilizers, the herbicides. And then you could work math with that and get a doubling or tripling food prices based on the non-availability of us to grow in the Northern Hemisphere. Okay, that was in May. But then, the USDA was going to put out some rosy figures, and, some farmers may have said, yeah, it's possible we could get this factory might open up again, this one might get repaired, maybe. And then as we progressed into the mid-plant, or I should say the mid-grow season after plant, around July and August, there would be a full reckoning of what was really in the fields. Because when they do those crop tours, if they're going out there and they're looking, as far as the horizon can see and there's nothing planted, at that point it's pretty hard to hide the information. And then that's where the second amplification wave would be, and that would be the second amplification of food pricing based on what was not going to be harvested, like the futures markets would run with that, and food prices would escalate. I'm going to say right around end of July, first 2 weeks of August. But then as we come into the harvest season in October or late September, that's when it was really going to hit, and the terror and the panic on this planet was going to ramp up significantly, because I believe, this is prior to Russia. So go with me, just play the game here. This is prior to anything Russia happening, all these things I'm talking about. But now Kazakhstan's not going to export grain. The full Black Sea region's locked off, so we're not going to get any grain out of Ukraine. I was looking at, they're not planting at all. So the number, the USDA was saying 30% decline in Ukrainian agriculture production because they're not planting. And then within 2 weeks, they flipped that to 50%. And the word I'm getting from actual people in Poland is like, there's nothing being planted. None. They don't even have their inputs. Russia's going to be cutting off the grains too. And I just saw today, or was it yesterday, Russia said they are going to, if you're on the naughty list and they say you're going to pay for whatever resources in gold or their petro ruble, whatever you like to term that new currency that's evolving, commodity, gold commodity ruble, whatever you want to term it as, doesn't matter. It's the same thing. They now have come out today and said, even if you pay with gold, we are not going to sell to you, the Western countries. But they control 40% of the global fertilizer supply.
Yeah, the unfriendlies, they put it. That's what they call it.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's my timeline. So how do you think that matches up with what you talked about with the declining economy and the crash and then the reemergence in 2023 CBDCs?
This is interesting. I mean, several points. The first little bit that I wrote down on a piece of paper was Russia, no soup for you. Remember that Seinfeld skit where he's just, no soup for you. That's what Russia's doing now to the unfriendlies. We apparently not going to be able to get, a good number of resources. I mean, they're just not going to sell anyone not friendly to them anymore. The energy crisis, too, is very interesting. My last guest joined me from Prague out there in Europe, and he said he's even been dialing it back. I mean, he's talking about like not even, barely keeping on his heater. And he says his prices, his gas bill or whatever is just like astronomical. So they're really trying to kill people that way, too. But I'm still taking a look at, because I think the whole food situation, it's going to tie in with the next pandemic or two or three. I mean, I think there's a lot on the table. There's smallpox, still a part of the dark winter script, which now, since we're past this winter, now we got to like fast forward to December. And I don't know when does winter actually start? Isn't it like late mid or late December or something like that, technically speaking? So now I'm kind of like looking ahead to like this December, so to speak, when we're talking about the dark winter script and a potential. But now they're talking about GMO mosquitoes. You got Marburg. You got bird flu. We didn't even talk about bird flu yet, David. You got more. I mean, since the last time we talked, there's like Iowa and all these other kind of states killing millions of birds. I know Ice Age Farmers have been doing some good research on that. Point is, I'm trying to make, I think it's going to be like sort of everything sort of coming at once. So I'm looking at like that September, October, November winter. I could very much see a stock market crash, the rug being pulled out in September. Then, and I know you've studied the history of Bolshevism and communism too. They love October for revolution. So once like the food riots start happening at some point in, probably like mid to late September, running over into October. So like, I think October, November is going to be insane with like food riots and protests. It ties in with scripture, distress of nations news. So in terms of the actual like collapse, where we can say like definitively like on the headlines, okay, they just kind of crashed the system, I'm looking at like September, like later this year, because everything seems to be pointing to like virtually every country talking about digital currency 2023. And again, I don't know. I'm not the expert in terms of like how fast they can do that. Like we'll be like in some sort of limbo period for like 3 months, 6 months, and people be begging for the system. Like, hey, roll out something soon so we can eat type of thing. Like, I don't know. That's where I would rely upon you in terms of that transition. And that's why that whole rationing card makes sense to me. Yeah, that really does. I think that could be like the intermediary before we even get into that, whatever is finalized. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, no, Russia cut off the palladium to the States. Now, that's a manufacturing metal that's essential in just so many. If you look up uses for palladium in manufacturing and industry, and they'll give you a huge list of about 30 things that once that's cut off, industry in America ceases. Unless they can get the palladium elsewhere, but then if you go looking over to China to get it, they're playing with Russia and they're going to be like, no way, U.S., we're not giving you the palladium. So it looks as if the embargo is it flipped script on the opposite direction where, if you would have taken a real deep dive into what Russia in the commodities sector controls across the planet and what countries are reliant on that, America relies, this is it, 25% of the global palladium production makes it to the States. So when that's cut off, you got to okay, then we get into the tailing edge here of, well, that factory needs to shut down. That fabrication facility needs to shutter as well because they don't have the inputs. I mean, how many times did we read last year about the auto manufacturers stopping production because they didn't have a part? Well, what about if you don't even have the metal to even make some of these circuitry boards or whatnot that go into everything from solar panels to any kind of electronic devices, appliances, the fire suppression equipment, heat sensors, all these things that are running on palladium that you need them for. Because we're really going to revert back in time here. I would see us dropping back about 150, 170 years in terms of lifestyle and comfort. Yeah, we're going to really rock back into everybody's going to grow their own food. It's going to be such a shock for so many people. I just don't know mentally how many people can transition through it. That's one thing. Let alone the physical needs of the body and et cetera. It's the mind that's going to break a lot of people.
Yeah, and think about it too, the supplement shortages, food shortages, people not getting enough nutrition. We're always talking about physical health, but if you don't have mental health, you ain't gonna have physical health. Trust me. I've been there, done that. Nutrition is of the utmost importance. I'm going to read off a few more headlines and let's break down lifestyle changes, maybe things we can do. I've got a few things scribbled down here on my paper, but I'm going to read you a few more off of Grand Solar Minimum breaking news from just this morning. Let's see. Arizona State cotton farmers devastated by United States mega drought. Yeah, here we go. Mega drought destroys crops in the state of Montana, adding to a list of problems. And I read all. I was going to read everything that Mike Adams had to say, but I'm just going to summarize with one quote. The World Food Bank executive director just said this the other day. He said, "If you think we've got hell on earth now, you just get ready." So that I think that summarizes what we're talking about right now. And this is why Dave and I have been talking about these things for years. It's not like we were just talking about this the last, few years even. I've been covering preparedness and survivalism for like nearly a decade now. I mean, we saw this coming around the corner, David. And I mean, for most people, it's going to be a little too late, too little too late. But let's say you're starting late in the game prepping wise. What would you do first? Like, give us like sort of a program that you would, let's say we only had a month left. If we really knew, like, what would you do stage by stage?
Well, I'd sit down with my wife or my kids and have some papers in front of us and then, look to see what the finances are in the household, to break down and allocate a certain amount of funds for seeds, for storable foods, for tools, for medicinals and these types of things, right? Because if you just go in there blind shotgunning it, you're going to have, it's better to target the spending on what you're really going to need. And then, let's say you had $500 for seeds, for example. Well, you could get bulk seeds online, but then you can try, surprisingly, I'm not a fan of Walmart, but we went in there to go, we were looking for some metal shelving, so we thought we'd go in there and look for it. And their seed selection was surprisingly large and unbelievably inexpensive. It was like $1.40 for a bag of seeds, or a little pouch of seeds. And usually, the $4.99 for more of the name brand, Burpee and that kind of stuff. But these other seeds, which was an American brand, but it was only $1.44 for that. So you got to think, what, and then, you have to pull it down into what do you know how to grow, and then what do you like to eat first, because you can't grow stuff that you don't like to eat. Like, I'm not a fan of raw onions and stuff. So for me, I'll have shallots and things and leeks, but I'd prefer to put more of that into other lettuces. And romaine lettuce has way more nutritional value than like iceberg lettuce. So I needed to start breaking down the different types of lettuces even. So for a mind experiment, like you're talking microgreens and micronutrients and sort of thing. If you're going to spend the time to grow it, which one gives you the most micronutrients for your buck? So, that's a whole study in itself of just allocating money for seeds and then the whole nutritional value of the plants you're growing. And then what are the seasons of that? Do you have any like row covering so you can still get things out? Do you have a greenhouse? I mean, you that's just on the food end. Do you have irrigation? Do you have timers? Do you have drip hoses? All these kind of thing. And you start to like, that $500 for seeds turns into like $3,000 or $4,000 to try to get stuff that you're looking for, hoses and all these kind of thing, and watering, sprinkler systems and thing. Like, that's just on that end. And even to understand that and become productive at that takes years. But if you're going to do it in a pinch, it's going to be OJT pretty much, and you're going to make the mistakes. And when it's super mission critical, if your food supply goes down, you die. And that's not a place you want to be in. So then you're going to have to get with your neighbors and maybe take some gardening classes and like work your bututski off weekend after weekend, day, night classes, everything to learn how to grow that food.
Let me ask you this question. I've actually, I've proposed this to economists here on my program. And, in general, it's never good to put yourself purposefully in debt. But you and I both understand the game, right? Money doesn't matter. I mean, we know they're going to try to get people over to this digital economy. If money doesn't matter at this point, and again, we always try to stay within the parameters of what the church teaches for us. You always have to have that intent of paying off the debt. Maybe if you don't have the immediate money, maybe start using that credit card. What do you think? I mean, if money really not going to matter, I mean, they're going to come for us no matter what. Even if you own property, eventually they're going to come for you, right? You own nothing and be happy. They'll probably claim eminent domain at a certain point. And, I mean, what's your thoughts there?
Well, you want to have some precious metals for sure. Silver. If you're scrimping by and you're talking about using credit cards to, if you're at that level where you're thinking about using credit cards to move through these changes because you didn't prepare by now, the very least you could do is spend the $1,000 and get some silver, because that will help hold value loss as this money hyperinflates the U.S. dollar. And at that point, you could pay property taxes with that, provided you had like fractional rounds, 1 ounce rounds. But if you have a kilo bar and your property tax is $400 and the price of silver is $12,000 an ounce, and you're like, well, I only have this 35 ounce bar of silver, and you're looking at $1 million for the bar, you're going to need something fractional, because you're not going to want to trade that in for paper. You want to keep holding the silver and only like barely. You're going to need a knife to scrape a piece off. Okay, close enough. And
you think they'll actually take precious metals up? I mean, that was the argument of Lynette Zhang, and I argued back, when all is said and done, I don't think they're going to take anything but the digital currency.
Right. So, I mean, at that point, there's always going to be a black market there's always been black markets through history. Like, if there's not a black market, that is the outlier. That's the Six Sigma event in history, is not having a black market. Because anytime in duress and thing, people will do it. There's always a tradable. So, somebody might take and charge you a percentage to go over and then, change that silver into what would be the digital currency and then flip it into your account somehow.
Well, appreciate the time as always. Let's talk next month, man. Appreciate it.